Thanks, Stephen. Stephen was most grateful when we figured out that he had to teach Genesis chapter 19, which is probably the worst chapter in the Bible. So good job, Stephen. You check that off. You'll add that to your resume. Check it off the list. I taught Genesis chapter 19 publicly. Today we're in Genesis chapter 20 and chapter 21, and this is Abraham. Oh, I thought it was one of those alerts where everybody's phone's going off. Okay. I did plan out. We will finish the Septuagint and January of next year, and then the Pentateuch. I'm like, let's go through the entire Septuagint. We're going to do these 5 books, and we'll finish in the end of January next year. And then, if everybody's still sane and we're all still friends, then we'll begin to study the book of Revelation. And but I'm going to make you sign a contract, all right? And it'll be good. It'll be good. And then we're going to start our Hebrew sermon series the week after Easter, which will finish in September of 2024. So 43 sermons. It's going to be great. Genesis chapter 20. Okay, so here's what's going on. Abraham picks up and leaves and begins to move to another place. I gave you an outline there of chapter 20. Verses 1 and 2 is an introduction, and 3 and 7. And then God and Abimelech encounter, and then Abraham and Abimelech encounter, verses 8 through 16. There's some really funny things in this passage, in this chapter. I just kind of point them out to kind of show the craziness of Abraham. So verses 1 and 2, here's the introduction. From there, Abraham traveled to the region of the Negev and settled between Kadesh and Shur. While he was staying in Gerar, Abraham said about his wife Sarah, "She's my sister." So King Abimelech of Gerar had Sarah brought to him. So you have the deception. Now, how many times recorded in the Bible do we have that Abraham has done this thus far? This is the second time, right? The first one was, in Egypt, right? And so Abraham and Sarah just kind of figured out this conniving deal where they're like, hey, we're just going to tell everybody you're my sister, right? So, I mean, it's like Arkansas, right? No, I'm joking. And so, but I can say that because I was born in this state, man. I was born in this state. God said about his wife, Sarah, she's my sister. So, King, I better stop. So you have this deception of Abraham and Sarah to King Abimelech. Then you have this abduction where King Abimelech's like, all right, let's roll. Now we know from the first part when Abraham and Sarah deceived in Egypt that Sarah was what? She was beautiful. She was young. She was like this. That wanted to the Pharaoh wanted her, right? And so here, Sarah is probably about 97 years old. And in fact, she says in chapter 18 about herself, she's just worn out. Chapter 18, verse 12, when she found out she was going to have a baby. So we don't know the reason why he took her. He just takes her. Verse 3, but God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, "You're about to die because of the woman you've taken, for she's a married woman." Now, I've had some weird dreams recently. I've had some weird dreams. In fact, I told the staff I had a dream just the other night that I was at my house and the door rang, and Maitland Hurley was at the door, and I answered it, and she handed me 2 twin babies and said, "These are for you." And I shut the door and I went back to my house and with my kids and my family, and we had 2 twin babies in our house. And I woke up from that dream. But I mean, I've had some weird dreams recently, but I can't imagine having a dream where you're dead asleep and God's like, "You're about to die," right? I mean, I've never had that dream, but you're about to die because the woman that's in the house is a married woman, right? You've been deceived. You've been deceived, Abimelech. Now, Abimelech had not approached her. I underline that because we're going to come back to that. Abimelech had not approached her. She said, "Lord," so he said, "Lord, would you destroy a nation even though it's innocent? Didn't he himself say to me, 'She's my sister,' and she herself said, 'He's my brother'? I did this with a clear conscience and clear hands." Okay, let's stop. What do you hear Abimelech speaking to God in his dream? What's he saying? It's not my fault. I had no knowledge of this. I had no understanding that this guy was married. I'm just doing what this guy said. But God's like, no, you're going to be held accountable for that, right? And he's like, I don't know how this isn't my fault. Why are you going to bring all this on me? I did this with a clear conscience. I have clean hands. I didn't do any of this stuff. So then God said to him in the dream, yes, I know you did this with a clear conscience. I've also kept you from sinning against me. Therefore, I have not let you touch her. Underline that. We'll come back to that. Now return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, for he will pray for you and you will live. But if you do not return her, now that you know that you will certainly die, you and all who are yours. This is the first time the word prophet is seen in the Bible. You have Abraham being described here as a prophet. He's a prophet. And God says what you're going to do. So I gave this in your handout. You remember we studied chiasms, right? So you take a passage of scripture and you can draw this and it leads into the main point and then comes back out and all of them line up. This dream is a chiasm. In fact, I put it here. And you have A, which matches up with A1 down at the bottom. So you are as good as dead. But verse 7, God says, you will live. If you do not, you and others will die. Then in the B, it says the woman you have taken. And then in B at the bottom, it says, return the man's wife. Then you have C, Abimelech had not gone near her. Then you have C, I did not let you touch her. Then you have D, will you destroy an innocent nation? And D, I have kept you from sinning her. I did not let you touch her. I've kept you from sinning. With a clear conscience, clear conscience. And so all the dream is pointing to what statement? God said to him in a dream. What's happening is you have this story that's balanced back and forth, driving to this one thought. God said to him in a dream. Now, I thought about that and I thought, Abraham was promised in chapter 12 that he was going to be a great father of a great nation. He's going to be the father of a great nation. God's going to bless him. God's going to do all these things. And it seems to me up to this point and following, Abraham has about done everything he could to mess that up. I mean, he's done this and allowed this and not this. And God's intervening, right? It's almost God's made a promise and a covenant and I'm going to keep it. And I know Abraham has done this, but I'm speaking to you and saying, you got to return her. So in the midst of Abraham, in the midst of his disobedience and outrageous behavior and various things, you have this God speaking to Abimelech. God is in the middle of this situation. God said to him in a dream. So you kind of have that chiastic representation there in the dream. Verse 8, early in the morning. And I figured that was really early in the morning. Abimelech got up, called all of his servants together, and personally told them all these things, and they were terrified. Then Abimelech called Abraham in and said to him, now listen to this. What have you done to us? How did I sin against you that you brought such enormous guilt on me and my kingdom? What have I done to you, man? What have I done something to you that you would cause this event to take place, knowing that I was going to die? What have I done to you? And then he says, you've done things to me that should never have been done. Abraham's scolded right here. Abimelech asked Abraham this question. What made you do this? And Abraham's standing there, and I just picture in my mind, and Abimelech just loses it on him. This stuff should never have been done. What in the world are you doing? You would brought ruin on me, my family, all the people around here. Well, I don't know, just is angry. What are you doing? Then he says, what caused you to do this? And Abraham gives 3 reasons why he did this in the next verses. And I want you to see each one of them. He says this, Abraham replied, here's the first one. I thought there's absolutely no fear of God in this place. Abraham, so I made an assumption, Abimelech, that I came to this land and nobody in here feared God. I believe that when I entered here, there was not a single person who worshiped God, who knew God, who would follow God, that there was no belief in anyone who would follow God. And so Abraham's like, I did this because I thought this was a pagan country and a pagan world. That's what he's saying here. I didn't think there was anybody. There's absolutely no fear of God in this place. So they'll kill me because of my wife. And I think the first excuse that he gives here is this, because this is a pagan country and no fear of God. So let's talk about us in our life. We live in a fallen world. And can I just say this? I want to just interject this real quick. It's getting worse and worse and worse and worse. There was a horrible, horrific, unspeakable murder that took place this week in Nashville, where those 3 adults and those 3 kids have lost their life. But have you watched the news since then? The news is saying, who's the victim? The shooter. Because the Christians didn't approve of them. I've seen people talk about it on MSNBC, CNN. I've read it in the Washington Post, the New York Times. I've read it in articles all across the area. In 2 days, there's nobody talking about the 3 kids and the 3 adults. It's the Christians who didn't affirm her in her transition and was mean to her, and her parents didn't approve of it, and so she's the victim. And I'm telling you, as the days go by, the culture is coming to us quickly, and it's gonna be heavy, and it's gonna be dark, and it's gonna be rough. But Abraham, we may live in a land where you think nobody fears God and loves him, but Abraham, that doesn't give you permission to sin. That doesn't give you a check where you can say, man, you know what? This world has just gone to hell in a handbasket. Nobody follows the Bible. Now I'm just going to live like they do. No, it doesn't. It doesn't give us a green pass, a hall pass to go and sin. And so Abraham's like, listen, I live in this. I thought nobody feared the Lord. Then Abraham's like, I'm going to get you on a technicality. Have you ever read this verse? This is like you're like, Abraham, are you for real? Verse 12. Besides, she really is my sister, the daughter of my father, though not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. So when God had me wonder about my father's house, I said to her, show your loyalty to me wherever you go and say about me, here's my brother. So the second reason is this. Well, she technically is my sister. Like, I didn't lie. The family tree doesn't have very many branches, but she is technically my sister. And you're like, Abraham, that's stretching it a tad there, buddy. So he's trying to stretch the truth. She really is. It's okay. It's kind of a bending of it. And then the third thing is that the last verse was I just read. It appears in Abraham's excuse here that we know they've done it once in Egypt, but it sounds like they've done this little skit a bunch. So when the God had me wander from my father's house, I said to her, show your loyalty to me wherever we go and say about me, he's my brother. Doesn't that kind of read like maybe they've done this before? They got away with it here. Let's tell this guy here. Let's do this. This kind of became their bit, right? And so Abraham's excuses are, we were in a pagan land, so I thought it was okay for me to do it. I'm really going to stretch this truth to make it out to be as though it is true, this lie into a truth. And 3, I've gotten away with it in the past, and I thought I'd get away with it again. Then Abimelech took flocks and herds and male and female slaves, gave them to Abraham, and returned his wife Sarah to him. Abimelech said, look, my hand is before you, wherever you want. And he said to Sarah, look, I'm giving your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. It's a verification of your honor. To all who are with you, you are fully vindicated. Slapping him in the face a little bit, saying, I'm giving it to your brother. You've been vindicated. You're fully restored in your honor. Then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech, his wife, and his female slaves so that they could bear children, for the Lord had completely closed all the wombs in Abimelech's house on account of Sarah, Abraham's wife. But I had you underline 2 things in that chapter. Remember what they were? The first one, verse 4, Abimelech had not approached her. That's what my translation says. What's your translation say? Had not gone near her? Yeah. Okay. Then you go over into the dream. Therefore, I have not let you touch her. What's being emphasized here? This is important. So let's get this. What's being emphasized here? No intimacy. There was nothing happened between Abimelech and Sarah. Nothing. I didn't touch her. I didn't go near her. God's like, I saved you from yourself. You didn't do that. Now, why is that important? That's right. Who's born in the next chapter? Isaac. And so God's like, we want to make sure there's complete clarity here. Isaac is not Abimelech's son. He didn't touch her. He didn't go near her. Isaac is clearly Abraham's son. And I just think those little nuances in there are really important for even us to understand. Like, there's no doubt about it. What we're going to see in the next chapter is Isaac's going to be born, a fulfillment of the promise that God has made to Abraham and Sarah for years and years and years. And it was not Abimelech's boy. This is Abraham's boy. Verse 1 of chapter 21. Then the Lord came to Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. But we could just spend hours on that verse. The Lord came and as he said he would do, and he did what he promised to do. Sarah became pregnant, bore a son to Abraham in his old age. At the appointed time, God had told him. Abraham named his son who was born to him, the one Sarah bore to him, Isaac. When his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him as Stephen had commanded him. If you have questions about that, Stephen will be happy to answer that. Abraham was 100 years old, and his son Isaac was born to him. Sarah said, God has made me laugh, which is where Isaac's name comes from. And everyone who hears will laugh with me. She also said, who would have told Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne a son for him in his old age. God kept his promise. Abraham did about all he could do to mess this up, but God kept his promise. And they hold this little baby boy. The child grew and was weaned, and Abraham held a great feast on the day Isaac was weaned. So Isaac's about 2 or 3 years old. But something happens. Sarah saw the son mocking, the one Hagar, the Egyptian, had borne to him, Abraham. Who's that? Ishmael. So she said to Abraham, drive out this slave with her son, for the son of this slave will not be a co-heir with my son Isaac. And so the rivalry intensifies. Ishmael is about how old? Guess? Early teens. Yeah, early teens. So you have this teenager boy who's picking on little Isaac, and Sarah gets upset, and she tells them to get out, which is somewhat ironic because isn't she the one who gave approval to them actually having a baby? So anyway, I'm sure Abraham never mentioned that to her, This is all your fault. This was very distressing to Abraham because of his son. But God said to Abraham, do not be distressed about the boy and about your slave. Whatever Sarah says to you, listen to her, because your offspring will be traced through Isaac. That's good advice, man. Isaac, and I will also make a nation of the slave's son because he is your offspring. Early in the morning, Abraham got up, took bread and a water skin, put them on Hagar's shoulders, and sent her and the boy away. She left and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water and the skin was gone, she left the boy under one of the bushes. This is so sad to read. And went and sat at a distance about a bow shot away, for she said, I cannot bear to watch the boy die. And while she sat at a distance, she wept loudly. God heard the boy crying, and the angel called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, what's wrong, Hagar? Don't be afraid. For God, this is so good. For God has heard the boy crying from the place where he is. Get up, help the boy, grasp his hand, for I'll make him a great nation. Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well. So she went and filled the water skin and gave the boy a drink. God was with the boy, and he grew. He settled in the wilderness and became an archer. He settled in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother got a wife for him from the land of Egypt. So who would be the descendants of Ishmael? So what? The descendants of Ishmael. What would be his great nation? Yeah, the Islamic nation. Yeah. It's weird to see nations at war, and you can go back to the story to which it all began. Deep hatred. At that time, Abimelech, accompanied by Phicol, the commander of his army, said to Abraham, God is with you in everything you do. Swear to me by God here and now that you will not break an agreement with me or with my children and descendants. As I have been loyal to you, so you will be loyal to me in the country where you are a resident alien. And Abraham said, I swear it. But Abraham complained to Abimelech because of the well that Abimelech's servants had seized. Abimelech replied, I didn't know who did this thing. You didn't report anything to me, so I hadn't heard about it until today. Abraham took flocks and herds and gave them to Abimelech, and the two of them made a covenant. And Abraham separated 7 ewe lambs from the flock, and Abimelech said to Abraham, why have you separated these 7 ewe lambs? And he replied, you are to accept the 7 ewe lambs from me so that this act will serve as my witness that I dug this well. Therefore that place was called Beersheba, because it was there where the two of them swore an oath. And after they made a covenant at Beersheba, Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, left and returned to the land of the Philistines. Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba, and there he called on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abraham lived as an alien in the land of the Philistines for many years. And so we'll stop there with Abraham and Sarah and Isaac. And we'll pick up next week in what is one of the more great passages of the book of Genesis, the sacrifice of Isaac.